The rain, a relentless curtain of despair, had been falling for 3 days straight, mirroring the mood that had settled like a shroud over the sleepy, God-fearing town of Midlothian, Virginia. It was the kind of town where porch lights stayed on until dawn, where children still played in the streets unsupervised, and where the most shocking news typically involved a particularly aggressive squirrel in Mrs. Henderson's bird feeder. All that changed on a crisp autumn morning, a day that would forever be etched into the collective memory of its inhabitants as the day the monster arrived. Detective Mark Thorne, a man whose surname would ironically and tragically become synonymous with the very evil he pursued, stood by the yellow police tape, the chill seeping into his bones despite the thick, Gore-Tex jacket. The air hung heavy with the metallic tang of blood, a smell that, once encountered in such a context, never truly left you. The quaint, almost idyllic suburban house, painted a cheerful butter yellow, now seemed to scream with silent horror. Its front door, ajar just enough to reveal a glimpse of the chaos within, felt like an open maw leading to hell. "You seen anything like this, Thorne?" Officer Miller, a fresh-faced rookie whose enthusiasm for police work was slowly being eroded by the grim realities of it, asked, his voice barely a whisper above the drumming rain. His face, usually flushed with youthful optimism, was pale and drawn, his eyes wide with a mixture of revulsion and awe. Mark didn't answer immediately. His gaze was fixed on the paramedics, their faces grim, as they carefully wheeled a gurney out of the house. A sheet, stained a sickening crimson, covered the form beneath. This was the third one in as many weeks. 3 women, 3 quiet, unremarkable lives brutally extinguished. And each time the same chilling, meticulous signature. The first victim had been Sarah Jenkins, a beloved kindergarten teacher, found in her home a month ago. Her body, posed in a grotesque parody of domestic bliss, had been a shocking discovery. Then came Mary Beth Peterson, a retired librarian, 2 weeks later. Her house, usually immaculate, had been a tableau of controlled chaos, her body arranged with an unsettling artistic flair. And now, Eleanor Vance, a young single mother, whose innocent face had graced the local paper just last week, smiling brightly as her daughter won the county fair's pie-baking contest. "No, Miller," Mark finally said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Not like this. Not in Midlothian." He ran a hand over his tired face, the stubble scratching against his palm. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. The cases consumed him, seeping into his dreams, turning mundane objects into twisted symbols of the killer's depravity. What was truly disturbing wasn't just the sheer brutality of the murders, though that was certainly present in spades. It was the precision. The victims weren't simply murdered. They were curated. Their homes weren't just crime scenes. They were stages. The killer, dubbed the Midlothian Butcher by the increasingly sensational local media, left no fingerprints, no discernible DNA, nothing but a macabre display that spoke volumes about his twisted mind. Dr. Elias Thorne, a renowned forensic psychologist from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, had arrived in Midlothian 2 days ago, a whirlwind of sharp suits, sharper intellect, and an unnerving ability to see patterns where others saw only chaos. He was Mark's younger brother, a fact they both tried to keep under wraps, fearing it might compromise the investigation. Elias, unlike Mark, thrived in the grim depths of the human psyche. He saw serial killers not as monsters, but as complex, albeit profoundly broken, puzzles to be solved. "The consistency is what's terrifying, Mark," Elias had said over a lukewarm cup of coffee at the diner this morning. His eyes, identical to Mark's in their intense blue, but lacking the weariness, alight with a strange, almost academic curiosity. "He's refining his art. Each victim, a brushstroke on a larger canvas." Mark had scowled. "Art? He's a psychopath, Elias, not a damn artist." Elias had simply raised an eyebrow. "Every serial killer, Mark, believes they are. They are creating something, fulfilling a need that transcends conventional morality. Our job is to understand that need, to find the pattern in the madness." Now, as Mark stepped inside Eleanor Vance's house, the air was thick with the cloying sweetness of decaying flowers and the metallic tang of blood. The living room, usually a cozy space filled with children's toys and family photos, was transformed. Eleanor's body, stripped bare, lay on a pristine white sheet spread on the rug. Her limbs were carefully arranged, her eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. A single, wilted red rose lay on her chest. But it wasn't the pose that sent a shiver down Mark's spine. It was the alterations. Her skin, meticulously flayed in certain areas, revealed the muscle beneath. Not haphazardly, but with surgical precision, like an anatomical diagram. And the pattern was disturbingly familiar. The same areas, the same precise incisions, replicated on Sarah Jenkins and Mary Beth Peterson. He's experimenting. Eris's voice, calm and measured, came from behind him. Mark hadn't heard him enter. Or rather, he's perfecting. This isn't random mutilation, Mark. This is a scientific study. A dissection. Mark turned to face his brother, his jaw tight. A dissection of what, Eris? The human soul. Eris walked slowly around the body, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning every detail, every subtle nuance of the scene. No, not the soul, Mark. Something more fundamental. The structure. The mechanics. He's looking for something. Or perhaps he's demonstrating something. He paused, his gaze fixed on a small, almost imperceptible discoloration on Eleanor's inner thigh. And he's getting bolder, more confident. Bolder. Mark scoffed, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. He's already committing these atrocities in broad daylight, in the heart of our town. What's bolder than that? Eris straightened up, his face grim. He's not just killing them, Mark. He's leaving them, as if they are specimens laid out for observation. And the lack of forensic evidence. It's almost supernatural. He's either incredibly careful, or he's leaving behind only what he wants us to see. The next few weeks were a blur of frustrating dead ends, endless interviews with terrified residents, and a growing sense of helplessness that gnawed at Mark's resolve. The media frenzy reached a fever pitch, turning Midlothian into a macabre tourist attraction. Fear gripped the town, and for the first time in its history, people started locking their doors, double-checking their windows, and avoiding eye contact with strangers. Eris, meanwhile, burrowed deeper into the case. His office at the FBI temporary headquarters in the Midlothian High School, a grim irony becoming a chaotic warren of psychological profiles, anatomical diagrams, and crime scene photographs. He rarely slept, fueled by black coffee and an insatiable desire to unravel the enigma of the Midlothian butcher. One evening, Mark found Eris staring at a large whiteboard, covered in cryptic notes and intricate drawings. Eris's posture was rigid, his shoulders hunched, and there was a strange intensity in his eyes that unnerved Mark. "He's learning," Eris murmured, not turning around. "From us. He's adapting." "What are you talking about?" Mark asked, stepping closer. "The patterns," Eris replied, tracing a finger over a diagram of the human circulatory system. "The incisions. They're not random. They follow specific pathways. Nerves, arteries, veins. It's like he's trying to map the human body from the inside out." "A medical student gone rogue?" Mark offered, but the idea felt hollow. This was far beyond a simple fascination with anatomy. "Perhaps," Eris mused, "but there's something else. Something ritualistic. The way they're posed. The rows. It's not just about the dissection. It's about presentation." He turned to Mark, his eyes alight with a terrifying realization. "He's not just a butcher, Mark. He's a teacher. And we are his students." The chilling implication of Eris's words hung heavy in the air. The killer wasn't hiding, he was performing. He wasn't simply murdering, he was communicating. But what message was he trying to send? The answer came in the most horrifying way imaginable. A week later, Sarah Jenkins' daughter, a bright-eyed 6-year-old named Lily, went missing from her backyard. The town erupted in a fresh wave of panic, the quiet despair replaced by a frantic, agonizing search. Mark led the search efforts, his heart a lead weight in his chest. The fear for Lily, for the next victim, was a physical ache. He pushed himself to the brink of exhaustion, driven by a desperate hope that this time, they could stop him before it was too late. The next day, a small, unassuming package arrived at the Midlothian Police Department. It was addressed to Detective Mark Thorne. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried roses, was a single, perfectly preserved human heart, and attached to it, a handwritten note, elegantly penned in a swirling script. The heart, detective, is merely a pump. The true essence lies within the intricacies of the vessels, the dance of the nerves, the fragile architecture of the flesh. Your understanding is incomplete. Come closer. Learn. A collective gasp went through the room as forensic pathologist Dr. Evelyn Reed, her face pale, confirmed what everyone already suspected. The heart belonged to Lily Jenkins. Mark Thorne stared at the gruesome package, the blood draining from his face. The killer hadn't just murdered a child. He had desecrated her, turned her into a grotesque lesson, and he had directly challenged Mark, taunting him, inviting him into his twisted world. Eris, his face a mask of grim determination, picked up the note with gloved hands. "He's escalating," he said, his voice flat. "He's no longer content with mere displays. He wants us to participate. He wants us to understand." "Understand what, Eris?" Mark asked, his voice raw with grief and rage. "That he's a monster? That he enjoys tearing people apart?" Eris looked at him, his gaze unwavering. "No, Mark. He wants us to understand him. His philosophy, his truth. And the disturbing part is, he believes he's offering us a profound insight. This isn't just about sadism. This is about ideology." The discovery of Lily's heart shattered whatever semblance of normalcy remained in Midlothian. Schools closed, parents barricaded their homes, and the local police force, stretched thin and emotionally scarred, began to crack under the pressure. The FBI, now with Eris at the helm, poured more resources into the investigation, but the killer remained infuriatingly elusive. Eris worked tirelessly, dissecting every aspect of the killer's communication, from the meticulous penmanship of the note to the macabre artistry of the crime scenes. He theorized that the killer was driven by an obsessive need for control, a warped sense of intellectual superiority, and a profound detachment from human emotion. He views these people as mere biological specimens, Eris explained to Mark one late night, the scent of stale coffee and desperation hanging heavy in the air. He doesn't see their lives, their dreams, their pain. He sees them as complex machines to be deconstructed, understood, and ultimately rearranged to his own design. "But why? What's the point?" Mark pressed, his voice hoarse. Eris turned from his whiteboard, his eyes narrowed in thought. "He's challenging the very notion of what it means to be human. He believes he's exposing a deeper truth about existence, something beyond the superficiality of emotions and relationships. He's a nihilist, Mark, and he's using the human body as his canvas to express that nihilism." The next victim was Thomas Miller, a popular high school football coach. His murder was different. He wasn't flayed. He wasn't posed in a ritualistic manner. He was found in his own garage, meticulously dismembered, his body parts neatly packaged in coolers, labeled with anatomical terms. The scene was horrifying, yet clean, almost clinical. And next to the coolers, a single, pristine white lily. The change in signature threw the investigators for a loop. Was it a new killer? Or was the Midlothian butcher evolving? Eris was convinced it was the latter. "He's moving beyond the artistic display, Mark," he explained, pointing to a new set of drawings on his whiteboard, anatomical sketches of a male body. "He's becoming more efficient, more scientific. The dismemberment isn't about desecration anymore. It's about precision. He's breaking down the human body into its fundamental components. He's dissecting the process of life and death itself." The white lily, a symbol of purity and rebirth, seemed a direct counterpoint to the gruesome nature of the crime. Eris interpreted it as a sign of the killer's ongoing experiment. He was refining his methodology, purging any unnecessary embellishments, focusing solely on the core of his morbid inquiry. The pressure mounted. The FBI was facing intense scrutiny from the media and the public. The governor himself called for daily updates, demanding answers, demanding an arrest. Yet, the Midlothian butcher remained an elusive phantom, a ghost in the machine of their investigation. One afternoon, as Mark was reviewing old case files, a chilling realization struck him. He remembered a cold case from years ago, an unsolved murder in a neighboring town, where a young woman's body had been found with similar, though less refined, anatomical alterations. At the time, it had been dismissed as an isolated incident, a random act of savagery. Now, with the clarity of hindsight, it felt like a nascent seed of the horror that had blossomed in Midlothian. He brought it to Eris, who, after a quick review, agreed. "He's been doing this for a long time, Mark. He's not new to this. He's been honing his skills, perfecting his craft, evolving his philosophy. Midlothian is just his grand debut." The implications were terrifying. The killer wasn't just a local threat. He was a nationwide menace, a predator who had been operating under the radar for years. The thought filled Mark with a renewed sense of urgency, a desperate need to stop this monster before he claimed another victim, before his twisted ideology spread further. The next few days were a desperate race against time. Eris, fueled by caffeine and an almost manic focus, constructed a new psychological profile. This killer, he argued, was likely highly intelligent, methodical, and deeply disturbed. He would be meticulous in his planning, leaving little to no trace. His victims were carefully chosen, not for personal connection, but for their symbolic value, for their ability to contribute to his macabre research. "He's not seeking attention, Mark," Eris explained, pacing his office like a caged tiger. "He's seeking validation. He believes he's on the cusp of a profound discovery, a fundamental truth about human existence. And he needs us to witness it, to acknowledge his brilliance." The key, Eris believed, lay in understanding the killer's underlying obsession. The anatomical precision, the meticulous arrangements, the subtle changes in method, it all pointed to a single, unifying theme. The human body as a vessel, as a machine, as a subject for experimentation. Then a breakthrough. A partial DNA sample, painstakingly recovered from beneath the fingernail of Thomas Miller, yielded a familial match to a distant relative in the state's criminal database. The name that came back sent a jolt of ice through Mark's veins. Elias Thorne. The name was eerily similar to his own. A chilling coincidence? Or something more sinister? The address linked to Elias Thorne was an old, dilapidated farmhouse on the outskirts of Midlothian, a place long rumored to be abandoned. A shiver ran down Mark's spine. All this time, the monster had been hiding in plain sight, a stone's throw from the very community he terrorized. The raid on Elias Thorne's farmhouse was swift and decisive. The air was thick with tension, a mix of adrenaline and apprehension. As the tactical unit breached the decaying front door, a wave of stale, musty air, tinged with a faint, disturbing odor, hit Mark. The house was a monument to rot and neglect, but beneath the grime, a chilling order emerged. The living room, surprisingly clean, was lined with bookshelves overflowing with texts on anatomy, physiology, and philosophy. Human anatomy charts adorned the walls, meticulously labeled. In the center of the room, a large, custom-built table, gleaming with what looked like dried blood, stood like an altar. Surgical instruments, terrifyingly pristine, lay neatly arranged on a tray. And then, in a hidden room in the basement, they found him. Elias Thorne. He was a man of unassuming appearance, gaunt and pale, with eyes that held a disturbing, detached intelligence. He sat amidst a macabre collection of human remains, meticulously preserved organs, and anatomical models. He wasn't disturbed, wasn't startled. He simply looked up at them, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, as if he had been expecting them. "Welcome, gentlemen," he said, his voice soft, almost melodious. "You're just in time. The lesson is about to begin." Mark felt a wave of nausea wash over him. This wasn't just a killer. He was a mad scientist, a grotesque philosopher who had turned the human body into his laboratory, his victims into his subjects. And the chilling part was, he genuinely believed he was on the verge of a profound scientific discovery. As Elias Thorne was led away in handcuffs, his gaze swept over Mark, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps something darker, in his eyes. He didn't resist, didn't fight. He simply allowed himself to be taken, a quiet, unsettling calm radiating from him. "You've learned much, Detective," Elias Thorne said, his voice barely audible above the din of the arrest. "But the true nature of existence remains elusive. There is so much more to uncover, so much more to dissect." Mark watched him go, a profound sense of exhaustion and grim triumph washing over him. The Midlothian butcher was caught. The reign of terror was over. But as he looked around the grotesque laboratory, a chilling thought settled in his mind. Was this truly the end, or merely the beginning of a deeper, more disturbing saga? The quiet desolation of Midlothian would forever bear the scars of Elias Thorne, America's fiend. The town had been a canvas for his twisted art, a laboratory for his macabre science, and a chilling testament to the darkness that could lurk beneath the most serene of surfaces. The arrest of Elias Thorne sent shockwaves far beyond the quiet confines of Midlothian. The national media, ravenous for sensationalism, descended upon the town like vultures, transforming the previously obscure suburb into a morbid landmark. Elias Thorne, the Midlothian butcher, became a household name, synonymous with a new breed of chilling evil. His meticulously crafted crimes, the anatomical precision, the taunting notes, it all painted a portrait of a serial killer unlike any other. For Detective Mark Thorne, the triumph of the arrest was quickly overshadowed by a gnawing emptiness. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind a profound fatigue and a deep-seated unease. He had caught the monster, yes, but the why, the how, the chilling depths of Elias Thorne's psyche remained a dark, unfathomable abyss. And the lingering question, a cold whisper in the back of his mind, was this truly over? Elias Thorne, his younger brother, now found himself at the epicenter of the most significant psychological profiling case of his career. Elias Thorne was a rare specimen, a unicorn in the parlance of forensic psychology, a killer who openly engaged with his pursuers, who seemingly desired to educate them, to reveal a truth through his atrocities. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, along with a team of the nation's top psychologists and psychiatrists, descended upon the maximum security facility where Elias was being held, eager to dissect his mind. Mark often found himself in the observation room, separated from Elias by thick, bulletproof glass, listening to the dispassionate, almost academic conversations between Eris and the incarcerated serial killer. Elias, despite the circumstances, exuded a strange calm, an almost detached serenity that was more unsettling than any outburst of rage. He spoke in a measured, articulate tone, his words carefully chosen, laced with an unsettling intellectual arrogance. "You see, Dr. Thorne," Elias would say, his voice resonating through the speakers, "the human form is merely a vessel, a temporary construct. It is the intricate machinery within, the symphony of nerves and blood and bone, that truly fascinates. Life, in its essence, is a series of precise biological functions. Death is simply the cessation of those functions. Nothing more, nothing less." Eris, always poised, would nod, his gaze never leaving Elias's face. "And your victims, Mr. Thorne? Were they merely subjects for your inquiries?" Elias would offer a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Subjects, yes, but also teachers." Each dissection revealed a new nuance, a subtle variation in the exquisite design. They allowed me to glimpse the true architecture of existence, unburdened by the illusions of sentiment and emotion. Mark would clench his fists, fighting the urge to shatter the glass, to reach through and silence the monster. Illusions of sentiment? This man had ripped apart families, plunged a town into terror, and he spoke of it as if he were discussing a scientific experiment. Eris, however, seemed to thrive in this chilling intellectual duel. He would delve into Elias's past, meticulously piecing together the fragmented narrative of his life. Born to seemingly normal, albeit emotionally distant, parents. Elias had been a prodigy, a brilliant student with a particular aptitude for biology and anatomy. He had excelled in medical school, displaying an almost inhuman precision in the dissection lab. But something had snapped, or rather, something had emerged. He dropped out in his third year, Eris explained to Mark one evening, reviewing Elias's psychological evaluation. No clear reason given, just a sudden, inexplicable withdrawal. But his professors noted a disturbing detachment, an almost clinical disinterest in the human aspect of medicine. He saw the body as a machine, not a patient. And that's when he started? Mark asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. We believe so, Eris confirmed. The first recorded incident, the one you found, was a crude precursor, a nascent experiment. He was perfecting his technique, refining his philosophical framework. The sessions continued, day after day, week after week. Elias never confessed in the conventional sense. He didn't express remorse or regret. Instead, he articulated his worldview, a chilling philosophy that elevated the physical over the emotional, the scientific over the spiritual. He believed he was a truth seeker, exposing the fragility of human existence, stripping away the sentimental veneer to reveal the brutal, mechanistic reality beneath. Emotions, Detective Elias had stated during one session, his voice resonating with an unnerving conviction, are merely chemical reactions, fleeting signals in a complex neural network. They cloud judgment, distort perception. True understanding comes from dismantling, from observing the raw components. Eris would press him, gently but relentlessly, on the victims. Did you feel anything, Mr. Thorne, when you processed them? Elias would tilt his head, a curious expression on his face. Only a profound sense of clarity, a deeper appreciation for the intricate design. It was an honor to truly understand them, to peel back the layers and observe the inner workings. The sheer dehumanization was sickening. Elias Thorne saw people not as individuals with lives and dreams, but as anatomical puzzles, as raw data for his perverse research. He was a scientist, but his laboratory was the human body, and his subjects were unwitting victims. The psychological profile developed by Eris and his team was extensive and terrifying. Elias Thorne was diagnosed as a highly intelligent, narcissistic psychopath with strong schizoid tendencies. He lacked empathy, felt no remorse, and possessed an inflated sense of self-worth, believing himself to be on a higher intellectual plane than others. His detachment allowed him to commit unspeakable acts without a flicker of guilt. He truly believes he is doing something profound. Mark, Eris explained, the strain evident on his face. He sees himself as an enlightened being, pushing the boundaries of human understanding. His work is his magnum opus, his legacy. The legal proceedings were a protracted nightmare. Elias Thorne pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, a strategy his defense team hoped would save him from the death penalty. But Eris's testimony, meticulously detailing Elias's chillingly rational thought process, his methodical planning, and his coherent philosophical framework, dismantled the insanity defense brick by brick. Elias Thorne was not insane in the traditional sense. He was profoundly disturbed, but rational enough to know the nature and quality of his actions. During the trial, Elias Thorne remained impassive, almost bored, as the gruesome details of his crimes were laid bare for the world to see. He listened to the tearful testimonies of the victims' families with a detached curiosity, as if he were observing a theatrical performance. His only flicker of emotion came when Eris, on the stand, detailed the precise, almost surgical nature of the mutilations, highlighting the intellectual drive behind them. Elias's eyes, for a fleeting moment, seemed to gleam with a strange pride. The jury, after a harrowing deliberation, found Elias Thorne guilty on all counts. The judge, visibly shaken, sentenced him to life without parole, ensuring that America's fiend would spend the rest of his days locked away, forever a serpent in a cage. But even after the conviction, Eris couldn't let go. Elias Thorne continued to fascinate him, to haunt his thoughts. The complexity of his mind, The chilling consistency of his ideology presented a challenge unlike any other Eris had encountered. He visited Elias regularly, conducting further interviews, attempting to delve even deeper into the abyss of his motivations. Mark, however, found himself pulling away. He had done his job. He had put the monster behind bars. He wanted to forget, to heal, to find some semblance of peace. But the image of Lily Jenkins' heart, the detached pronouncements of Elias Thorne, the quiet desolation of Midlothian, had become a permanent scar on his soul. One afternoon, Eris called Mark, his voice unusually excited, almost manic. "Mark, I think I've found it. The origin. The seed of his obsession." Mark, who had been trying to forget, felt a cold dread creep over him. "What are you talking about, Eris?" "His medical school records," Eris explained, his words tumbling out. Specifically, his time in the cadaver lab. He spent an inordinate amount of time with one particular cadaver. A young woman who had died of a rare, undiagnosed congenital heart defect. He became obsessed with her heart, with understanding its flaws, its intricate pathways. "So, he was just a brilliant but disturbed student?" Mark asked, a flicker of hope that the explanation would be simple. "No, Mark, not just that. He saw something in that heart, something that transcended mere pathology. He saw it as a blueprint for human fragility, a metaphor for the inherent flaws in our design. He began to believe that the human body, with all its imperfections, was a testament to chaos, not order. And that he, Elias Thorne, was destined to bring order to that chaos." Eris had discovered that Elias had started keeping a meticulous journal during his medical school days, hidden deep within his personal effects. It was a disturbing chronicle of his evolving philosophy, a descent into a nihilistic worldview where human life held no intrinsic value beyond its biological components. He had filled it with detailed anatomical drawings, philosophical musings on the nature of existence, and increasingly chilling fantasies of correcting the imperfections of the human form. He began to see himself as a kind of evolutionary engineer, Eris explained, a sculptor of flesh, refining nature's mistakes. The murders weren't just about understanding. They were about improving, about demonstrating his superior knowledge, his ability to transcend the limitations of biological life. The journal also revealed a disturbing truth. Elias Thorne wasn't just dissecting bodies. He was dissecting life itself. He viewed the human experience, love, joy, sorrow, as merely byproducts of biochemical reactions, superficial layers that obscured the deeper, more profound reality of anatomical mechanics. His victims were not individuals. They were simply vessels, examples of the flawed design he sought to rectify. Eris's revelation was both horrifying and illuminating. It provided a framework for Elias's inexplicable brutality, a twisted logic that, in his own mind, justified his actions. He wasn't simply killing. He was performing an elaborate, grotesque act of scientific and philosophical inquiry. As the years passed, Elias Thorne remained a silent, enigmatic figure in his prison cell. He continued to refuse visitors except for Eris, with whom he maintained a strange, almost symbiotic relationship. Eris, in turn, wrote books and articles on Elias's case, solidifying his reputation as a leading expert in the darkest corners of the human mind. He often spoke of Elias as the ultimate challenge, a puzzle that continued to yield new, disturbing insights. Mark, however, found it harder to move on. The memory of Midlothian, of the fear and the grief, lingered like a phantom limb. He tried to rebuild his life, but the shadows of Elias Thorne were long and persistent. He retired from the force early, seeking solace in quiet anonymity, but the image of the serpent in the cage, calmly articulating his monstrous philosophy, would forever be etched in his mind. One day, almost a decade after Elias Thorne's conviction, a cryptic package arrived at Mark's remote cabin in the mountains. There was no return address. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried, perfectly preserved red roses, was a small, exquisitely carved wooden heart, and attached to it, a single, elegantly penned note, in the familiar, unsettling script. The lesson, detective, is never truly over. For truth, like life, continues to reveal its intricate design, even within the confines of a cage. The pursuit of knowledge is an unending journey. Do you finally understand? Mark stared at the heart, his blood turning to ice. The serpent in the cage, though physically confined, was still reaching out, still taunting, still asserting his chilling philosophy. The message was clear. Elias Thorne believed he had won, that his truth had transcended the prison walls, that his influence, his ideology, was still at play. He immediately called Eris. His brother's voice, usually so composed, was laced with an uncharacteristic urgency. Mark, you got one too, didn't you? A rose? A heart? How did you know? Mark asked, his voice barely a whisper. Because I got one an hour ago, Eris replied, his voice strained. And so did every member of the prosecution team, every juror, every psychologist who ever interviewed him. He's sending a message. A final, chilling declaration. The realization settled in Mark's gut like a lead weight. Elias Thorne, even from within the confines of his prison, was orchestrating something. He was not merely a prisoner. He was a silent conductor, his twisted symphony continuing to play, resonating in the minds of those who had sought to contain him. The lesson was indeed not over. It was merely evolving, moving into a new, more insidious phase. The serpent in the cage was not simply contained. He was waiting, and the implications of that wait were more terrifying than Mark could possibly imagine. The saga of Elias Thorne, America's Fiend, was far from finished. It was merely entering its next, insidious chapter, a chapter where the boundaries between freedom and confinement, sanity and madness, would become terrifyingly blurred. The carved wooden hearts, delivered to every individual involved in Elias Thorne's conviction, were a chilling declaration. They weren't a threat of physical violence, but a psychological assault, a macabre reminder that even from within the deepest confines of the prison system, Elias Thorne remained an active, insidious force. For Mark Thorne, the small wooden heart, resting on his coffee table like a silent accusation, was a testament to the fact that the monster he had helped cage still had a grip on his life, on the lives of everyone who had dared to confront him. Elias Thorne, however, saw it differently. He interpreted the hearts as a final, arrogant flourish, a twisted artistic statement from a man who believed his work was complete, his message delivered. He immersed himself even deeper into Elias's case, meticulously re-examining every interview, every piece of evidence, every chilling philosophical pronouncement. He believed Elias was, in his own depraved way, seeking a form of immortality, a legacy that transcended his physical confinement. He's trying to control the narrative, Mark, Eris explained during one of their increasingly rare phone calls. He wants to be remembered not as a monster, but as a misunderstood visionary. The hearts are his final signature, his intellectual property, if you will. Mark was skeptical. Or he's just playing mind games, Eris, trying to remind us he's still out there. Both, Eris conceded. But the key is the why. What does he gain by this? Fame? Recognition? Or something more profound? Something only he can perceive? The years following the heart deliveries were quiet, a deceptive calm that did little to ease Mark's apprehension. Elias Thorne remained locked away, a silent, almost forgotten shadow in the darkest corners of the prison system. The sensationalism surrounding him eventually faded, replaced by newer, more immediate horrors in the relentless news cycle. Midlothian slowly began to heal, though the scars of the butcher remained etched into its collective memory. Mark, now fully retired, lived a solitary life, his cabin in the mountains a refuge from the world he no longer wished to engage with. He tried to forget, to bury the memories under layers of quiet routine and the solace of nature. But sometimes, in the dead of night, he would wake with a start, the image of Lily Jenkins' heart flashing in his mind, the ghostly whisper of Elias Thorne's voice echoing in his ears. The lesson is never truly over. Eris, conversely, became more and more consumed by Elias Thorne. He published several critically acclaimed books on the psychology of serial killers, with Elias Thorne's case being the central focus. He became a sought-after speaker, a leading authority on the darkest reaches of human behavior. Yet, Mark noticed a subtle change in his brother, a certain haunted look in his eyes, a growing intensity that bordered on obsession. Eris was spending too much time in the abyss, and Mark feared he was starting to lose himself in its depths. "He's a fascinating subject, Mark," Eris would say, his voice sometimes laced with an almost reverent tone when discussing Elias. "His mind is a labyrinth, but there's a perverse logic to it, a consistent internal framework. He's not simply mad. He's operating under a different set of rules, a different reality." "He's a murderer, Eris," Mark would retort, the frustration evident in his voice. "Don't let him charm you with his intellect." Eris would simply sigh. "It's not charm, Mark. There's a fundamental difference in perception. And understanding that difference is key to understanding the nature of evil itself." The first sign that the quiet was merely a prelude to a new symphony of horror came almost 15 years after Elias Thorne's conviction. It started with a series of seemingly unrelated disappearances across different states. The victims were diverse: a struggling artist in Portland, Oregon, a reclusive programmer in Austin, Texas, a retired botanist in Asheville, North Carolina. No clear pattern emerged, no obvious connection. Law enforcement agencies initially treated them as isolated missing person cases. But then the packages started arriving. Each package contained a meticulously crafted, exquisitely detailed anatomical model: a human hand, a foot, a section of the spine. Each model was made from a different, unusual material: polished bone, a complex resin, interwoven fibers that seemed almost organic. And with each model, a cryptic note, penned in the familiar, elegant script of Elias Thorne. The notes, however, were not taunting. They were educational. They spoke of the fragile beauty of the human form, the interconnectedness of biological systems, the symphony of life and decay. They read like academic treatises, dispassionate observations on anatomy and the impermanence of existence. And crucially, each note referenced the specific location where the corresponding individual had disappeared. The FBI, initially dismissive, quickly put the pieces together. The precision, the signature, the philosophical underpinnings, it all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Elias Thorne, despite being incarcerated, was still at work. The news hit the public like a cold wave of dread. How was he doing this? How could a man in solitary confinement orchestrate such a complex series of events across the country? The media frenzy reignited, but this time, it was laced with a chilling disbelief. Was Elias Thorne a genius manipulator? Or was there something else at play, something more sinister and incomprehensible? Mark, receiving a call from a frantic Eris, felt a familiar knot of dread tighten in his stomach. "It's him, Mark," Eris said, his voice strained. "He's back, but it's different this time. He's not killing directly. He's orchestrating." Eris, now a senior profiler, was immediately put in charge of the task force. He flew to the prison, demanding to see Elias. The prison authorities, bewildered and terrified, reluctantly granted access. Elias Thorne, older now, his hair streaked with white, greeted Eris with a faint, knowing smile. He seemed unperturbed by the accusations, by the renewed scrutiny. "Ah, Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice still melodious. "I trust you appreciate the continued dedication to my studies? The scope, you see, has expanded." "The disappearances, Elias," Eris pressed, his voice taut. "The models. How are you doing this?" Elias chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Do you truly believe, Doctor, that the physical body is the only means of creation? The mind, you see, is far more potent. It can conceive, inspire, instruct. And there are those who are receptive." The terrifying truth slowly dawned on Eris. Elias Thorne wasn't physically committing the crimes. He was inspiring them. He was a puppet master, pulling the strings of others, those who shared his warped worldview, or perhaps those he had groomed and manipulated over the years. The investigation revealed a disturbing network. Elias Thorne, through coded messages hidden in his correspondence with a seemingly innocuous prison pen pal program, had been cultivating a following. He had preyed on vulnerable individuals, those disillusioned with society, those searching for meaning in a chaotic world. He had offered them a higher truth, a perverse philosophy that celebrated the deconstruction of the human form, the rejection of emotional superficiality. He called them his disciples of dissection. These disciples, each operating independently in different locations, were carrying out his twisted vision. They were the ones abducting the victims, creating the models, sending the notes. Elias Thorne was not just a serial killer. He was the charismatic leader of a chilling cult, his influence extending far beyond the prison walls. The revelation sent a wave of fresh horror across the nation. The idea of a serial killer building an army from within prison was unprecedented, a chilling new dimension of evil. The task force, under Eris's leadership, raced against time to identify and apprehend the disciples before more lives were lost. Mark, drawn back into the nightmare, offered his insights, his intimate knowledge of Elias's modus operandi, his philosophical leanings. He joined Eris in the frantic efforts, driven by a desperate need to stop this new, insidious manifestation of Elias's evil. He's targeting specific traits, Mark, Eris explained, poring over a new set of profiles. Not just random victims. Each of the disappeared had a particular skill, a unique perspective. The artist for his creativity, the programmer for his logic, the botanist for his understanding of life cycles. He's assembling a collection of human attributes, not just bodies. The disciples, when apprehended, were a motley crew. Some were clearly disturbed, almost fanatic in their devotion to Elias's teachings. Others seemed to be regular individuals, swayed by Elias's cunning manipulation, desperate for purpose, drawn into his dark orbit. They spoke of Elias with reverence, of his enlightenment, of the profound truths he had revealed to them. During one particularly harrowing interview with a captured disciple, Eris asked, "Why? Why did you do this?" The disciple, a young woman with vacant eyes, simply replied, "Elias showed me the truth, that life is just a sequence of processes, and death, the ultimate reset. He helped me see beyond the illusion. He showed me how to truly appreciate the intricate design." The phrase intricate design sent a shiver down Mark's spine. It was Elias Thorne's signature, his chilling mantra. The investigation into the network of disciples of dissection was a sprawling, complex undertaking, involving multiple law enforcement agencies and international cooperation. It led to a series of high-profile arrests, dismantling Elias Thorne's morbid cult piece by piece. The rescued victims, though traumatized, were a testament to the task force's relentless efforts. But despite the success, a grim question remained. How many more disciples were out there? How many more had Elias Thorne infected with his venomous ideology? Eris, now gaunt and exhausted, confronted Elias Thorne one last time in prison. "It's over, Elias," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Your network has been dismantled. Your disciples are in custody." Elias merely smiled, a faint, almost pitying expression on his face. "Over, Dr. Thorne?" A symphony, once composed, continues to resonate in the hearts and minds of those who have heard its melody. My work is not confined to flesh and bone. It is in the idea, the philosophy, and ideas, unlike bodies, are immortal. He paused, his gaze fixed on Eris, a strange intensity in his eyes. "You, Dr. Thorne, have spent years dissecting my mind. You have peered into the abyss. And in doing so, you have allowed my truth to permeate your own understanding. The lesson, you see, continues within you. The echoes are undeniable." Eris stood there, a cold dread washing over him. Elias was right. He had spent so long in the darkness, trying to understand it, that a part of him had inevitably been touched by it. The boundary between observer and observed, between sanity and madness, had become disturbingly blurred. He had understood Elias Thorne's philosophy with a chilling clarity that sometimes frightened him. As Eris left the prison that day, he felt a profound sense of unease. They had stopped Elias Thorne's direct actions, but had they truly contained his influence? Or had he, through his very capture and the ensuing intellectual dissection by Eris, managed to spread his twisted ideology to a wider, more receptive audience? The unseen disciples, the ones who had read about his philosophy, who had been intrigued by his chilling intellect, how many of them had been subtly, insidiously influenced? Mark, watching his brother from a distance, saw the toll it had taken. Eris, once vibrant and intellectually curious, now seemed haunted, burdened by the weight of the evil he had so meticulously studied. The pursuit of Elias Thorne had not only consumed his career but had irrevocably altered his soul. The saga of Elias Thorne, America's Fiend, had begun with the quiet desolation of Midlothian, had delved into the terrifying depths of his brilliant, psychopathic mind, and had culminated in the unsettling realization that his evil was not contained by prison bars. It had become an echo, a pervasive whisper in the dark corners of society, a chilling reminder that some truths, once revealed, can never be unlearned. The carved wooden heart still sat on Mark's coffee table, a permanent fixture, a constant reminder. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he swore he could hear a faint, almost imperceptible melody, a discordant symphony playing softly in the distance. The unfinished symphony of Elias Thorne, forever resonating, a testament to the enduring power of a truly twisted mind, a chilling echo from the abyss that proved some fiends, even when caged, can never truly be silenced. The lesson, after all, was never truly over.